I just finished listening to The Red Lion, The Elixir of Eternal Life by Maria Sepesh. And it was read by Brian Scott. He has The Reality Revolution on YouTube. So if you want to listen to it, you can go there and listen. And wow, it was such a powerful book. And the thing that really landed for me in throughout the listening, it's an alchemist's novel, and it's about this being, this essentially a guy who goes through many lifetimes, and he retains the memory because he has drank the philosopher's stone, or the elixir of eternal life. And so while he has all of this awareness when he begins, he's very unadept at all of these things and unprepared for what he is about to encounter. And it's so beautiful the way that it takes the reader, the listener in this case, through all of the experiences of the many lifetimes of a soul, and the soul's conditioning and learning, going from total service to self to arriving finally at service to other. And that's truly what enlightenment is all about. Some of the things that really struck me while I was listening to this book is in my own journey. I was very young when I woke up, when I started having experiences with extra dimensionals, when I started receiving a lot of information. And in my youth, I mean, I was a teenager when I really became awakened to what was happening in the world and multidimensionally. However, with the teenager's mind and teenager's understanding of what was going on, there was also this teenage arrogance that is akin to, any teenager, not all of them, and I love teenagers, but I have one. There's this thinking that, like, okay, now I know everything, kind of the classic teenage syndrome where, like, I feel like I know more than my parents. Well, in the world of spirituality, while myself as a teenager, I was really opening up, and I did know more than a lot of people around me about those subjects. I was clearly at the beginning of my understanding and my alchemist's journey, essentially. So I wasn't ready to be a public figure. I wasn't ready to be a teacher, at least not on any large level. My skills were not purely service to other. And of course, this is ongoing. I'm not saying that I'm 100% service to other at this point in my life. However, after 30 years of practicing and learning and growing, I can see in my own journey the movement from more self-centered motives in my youth to more service-oriented motives in my maturity, if you will. And how, it wasn't until my 40s that I really came out as a spiritual guide and teacher publicly. And I wasn't prepared to be that until then, because, and this is corresponding with the book, when you have too much information and you're not honed enough in your skills of service, and your heart is not open fully or as full as it needs to be in service to other, then you're actually going to create a karmic setback for yourself if you're using your knowledge and your gifts, but not in the absolute highest possible way. And so I love how this journey chronicled what I felt like is my own experience from being young, youthful, teenager, in my early 20s, feeling, there were, and even in my like my preteens, there was a feeling of superiority that was in me because I had this program that I was left with from the extraterrestrial contacts that I had that was, don't tell the adults, they won't understand. So my youthful brain thought, well, then I must be superior to the adults. And this is, kind of subconsciously, that was the foundation of my training with the extra dimensional beings that I met with. I felt like, okay, I have information that even adults don't have. So while it wasn't a conscious thought, I didn't consciously think I was better than anybody. Subconsciously, there was this program or this stream of I must be superior in some way since I have this knowledge, this information that other people don't seem to have. And I think that's a natural, youthful reaction or response to that type of situation. And it's not accurate or correct. And I love how this book demonstrated that in a very powerful way of this youth going through all of these trials and tribulations and ultimately having to get his act together and his soul and his mind and his body and his spirit to behave in a way that was totally not about himself. And this is where I think that some people get a little bit confused, because personal work it seems selfish to people when you're focusing on yourself, you're focusing on meditating, on breath work, on contemplating, on honing your skills, all these things. You're refining yourself. This can seem in some ways selfish, like I'm spending a lot of time on myself. However, if you don't do that, how do you become polished in your personality, in your expression in the world? How do you keep your ego in check? And I think anyone that steps into the limelight or steps into the front of whatever field they're in, you're going to have all of this attention directed toward you. You're going to have a lot of eyes on you. You're going to have a lot of attention, a lot of interest, a lot of following. You must keep your ego in balance in order not to get sucked in to self-importance. And so I think self-importance is the biggest destroyer of spiritual progress and spiritual growth. When we become arrogant and self-important, we destroy all of our progress. And this is why if you tune into the law of one, Ra constantly talks about service to other versus service to self. We must overcome that youthful arrogance of, oh, I'm better than because, fill in the blank, all of the reasons why one might feel superior, and see how we're all equal and we're all on our journey in different places. A child is not less than because they're not mature, and a mature person is not more than or less than because of their maturity or their wisdom. But people are in different places in their soul progression, and we're in different places in our spiritual progress. And so this is something I see often in the world of spirituality, people who are evolving, people who are really becoming ascended in many ways, raising their frequency and feeling like, okay, now I'm at a certain level where maybe they feel superior. And I have this happen. Oftentimes I'll have people applying for my embodied ascension course, and I'll get on a call with them and I can describe the outline. I can't describe what we do in the actual course because it's the description versus the doing of it. It's very different. However, sometimes I will have a person say, oh, I've already done all of that. And there's that spiritual arrogance. And I'm not judging, right? It's the way that it shows up. When it's there, it's saying, well, I've already done my shadow work, I've already done my trauma work, I've already done, this and that, I've already worked on ascending myself. Therefore, I don't need that. Well, then why are you on the call? Right? So you must have gone on the call for some reason, is usually my response. But that characteristic, spiritual arrogance, is the very thing that will set you back or hold you back from progressing and from ascending your frequency while you are here. And so when I hear that from people, first of all, I recognize it because I've been there myself in my youth, my teens and early 20s. I did have much more of that in me than I do now. And it's an ongoing thing. I don't think that we're truly ever over it until we're truly ascended, right? If we're here in bodies, then probably we're still working on that. I know I am still working on that in many ways. And it's a constant ongoing thing to keep the ego in check as a spiritual leader and teacher. I've heard a multitude of spiritual teachers talk about that and the importance of that and how easy it can be to get out of balance in your ego when you're in front of people at any capacity and when you're in the limelight at any capacity. The teaching of the day really is about divine ego. So in the Red Lion, there was at some point the divine ego was mentioned. And it's one of those things, when I heard it, my whole body just kind of got tingly. I'm like, oh yes, the divine ego. And how we are always sort of working with our human ego and that little voice that's trying to tell us that you're superior or you're inferior. It's like the two shoulders. The one side is saying you're better than, one side saying, oh, you're not as good as. Angel and the devil, one on each side, one whispering one thing, the other whispering the other. Ultimately, the divine ego is when you've integrated and balanced all of that, those voices, the internal balance has settled in, and you've anchored enough light and enough service to other into your being that your ego becomes harmonized, balanced, aligned, and you're not having that struggle, that fight anymore of I'm good enough, I'm not good enough, and the imposter syndrome versus the I deserve this syndrome. And I think that's a great goal, is to find the divine ego within yourself. It's in all of us, and balance it and harmonize it and become aligned to it as often as possible. That doesn't mean you're going to stay in it 100% of the time. But what I would love to share here is that you have a divine ego, and that divine ego is the one that's telling you we are all one, we are all equal, we are all here on our spiritual journey at varying points, and the goal for each individual is to progress into the next version of you and to progress into your next version of service to other. And so I would love to share just a few I am statements to inspire more divine alignment with the divine ego and service-oriented service to other in your heart. I am aligned and balanced in my divine ego. I am always evolving in my purpose and my service to the collective of humanity. I am in service to other. I love all beings on this planet, seen and unseen. I appreciate and recognize the divine in all beings. I allow my divine ego to guide me and to infuse my thoughts with divine consciousness and awareness. I align and balance my ego and my draw to self-service to come into a greater harmony and balance with my divine ego. I recognize and do not judge when my human ego is out of balance. I appreciate the guidance and necessity of my human ego, and I give up my service to self nature so that I may be of greater service to the whole. I ascend my consciousness to the divine knowing. I ascend my physicality to hold higher divine light frequencies. I allow the divine ego to direct me in all of my movements, in all of my thoughts, and to allow my spirit to feel uplifted, balanced, and aligned by this greater knowing and experiencing of divine ego. The divine ego is the consciousness of the Christ, the Buddha, the enlightened masters, of oneness with pure divinity. I breathe in the elixir of oneness and of light of the divine into my body and my lungs, spreading out into every cell of my body. I breathe the elixir of life, of divine light into my DNA, and I activate my divine ego even more with each breath of light. I am one with all, and I recognize myself in all others. I am the embodiment of divine purity, divine light, and divine love. I appreciate this embodiment and its ability to hold light and serve others with the light that it holds. I invite and allow the light to upgrade my wellness in physical, mental, and spiritual capacity. I allow my body to align with the divine one. I allow my spirit and my mind, my consciousness to align with the divine one. I am aligned with the divine one in service, in light, in joy, with an open heart, and in gratitude for this life and for all life. Thank you for joining me. I love you. I cherish you. Namaste. Thank you so much for listening in. Please like, subscribe, and give me a comment. Let me know how that lands for you. I love hearing from you, and I answer as many comments as I have time for. I thank you for listening. Bye-bye.